It's The Journey with drug and alcohol attorney Mark G. Astor.
All right, everybody, welcome to another edition of The Journey. Be sure to follow us on Facebook and YouTube and Instagram and Twitter. And if you have any questions while you're watching the show, please be sure to post them so we can answer them. And I'm very excited to have my guest and good friend, Dr. Dawn Silver, with us. Hey,
Thank you for
how are you?
having me. I'm good. I'm excited to be here. You know, I'm passionate about this topic.
I know you are.
Happy to share.
And certainly somebody who's experienced in training and, you know, that I have tremendous respect for. But also, you know, you're a friend. And so I'm really excited to have you here. But what's really cool is sort of, and we sort of talked about it before we went on live, but, you know, our sort of connection here. So you're going to have to remind me, because I know we met through a mutual friend, right? Was it through Gary Kay?
We did. Gary Kimball, who actually works in the field at many facilities and does an excellent job spreading the 12-step word.
Yeah, he's a very inspirational guy, and he's just really an amazing human being. But what was really cool was when we sort of started to talk, and I think I had shared with you, I think you told me, you said, oh, my dad was a judge, right? Your father passed away a couple of years ago like mine. And I said, well, who was your dad? And you said, oh, Mark Poland. And I said, you got to be kidding me, right? Because at the end of my first year of law school, which would have been June of 1991, I had clerked for your dad up at the 4th DCA as a student intern, and I was like, that is really weird.
I think Gary Kay uses a phrase, there's no coincidences, there's God incidences. So I will quote Gary Kay in this moment.
Yeah, and I just have such fond memories of your dad, because he was really sort of a larger-than-life kind of character. And I think I shared you the story that one time we were sitting in there was like a cafeteria at the I think it's the old 4th DCA now, they've moved it, and I was having I was having lunch, and your father was looking at my lunch, and he looked over at me and said, you know, I never really took you for a brown bag kind of guy. And that was like your dad, right? He was like, here he is, he's an appellate court judge, and yet he was like the most down-to-earth person in the world. He really was.
Very much. That was a sweet story.
It was. It sort of got me emotional, only because he was really a brilliant, you know, legal mind, and yet he was like the most down to earth kind of guy in the world. He really was. It just it was funny. So I'm glad that we reconnected. It's very strange how the universe works, right?
It is.
It is.
And thank you for sharing the sweet stories as his daughter, now that he's deceased, especially hearing these stories later in life of all the wonderful things he's done with others, for others, and on the court bench over the years. It's always really nice.
You know, he was passionate, because, you know, when you clerk, even as a student, you kind of get to see like what goes on like behind the scenes. And I just remember one time he came in after he'd heard oral argument, and I won't use the language that he used, but he was nonetheless say he was not very impressed with one of the lawyers that had argued in front of him, and he was complaining to his clerks about that particular lawyer. And I was like, wow, you know, the judges really do care about how you, not just what you're saying, but how you say it, and, you know, that you prepared, and they know if you haven't prepared. It was interesting. So
true to form, he raised us to be very articulate, very passionate, and lifelong learners. So all of my siblings share this trait.
It's true. So let's talk a little about your background. Tell us, because I know that we both went to Michigan, but where you grew up and how you got into what you're doing now.
I'm actually native Floridian, the rare bird. Born in Miami, raised in Plantation. And then my parents were very strong about me and my siblings trying in the Northeast for college. So we went to Cornell, Yale, Michigan, all sorts of good schools up north. And I'm grateful always to have that experience, because the culture is very different from Florida. And then, not surprisingly, we all moved back after getting our doctorate degrees, legal degrees, etc. Because Florida's home. We wanted to be here. It's beautiful. It's sunny. It's a state that we treasure, and we all wanted to do our best in the state and for the state. And so each of us in our own professional and personal pathways does philanthropy, does parenting stuff, does professional work. And so when I came back, the world of substance abuse in Southeast Florida was messy, very messy. It was somewhat of the Wild West. There weren't the same laws and rules. People were finding it lucrative in ways that were sometimes helpful to clients and sometimes not so helpful. And at the time I came back, I was at FAU, Florida Atlantic University's Boca campus, right here, and I was finishing my postdoc. And so we were getting a number of dual diagnosis clients, of course, referred to us, and our staff was not particularly trained in substance abuse, and I had trained in neuropsychology, so a very different mindset for that field, but one that was so complementary to what was going on right at that moment. So coming from working with patients with dementia and multiple sclerosis and any type of neurodegenerative condition and hospital work, I was at FAU's counseling center with a bunch of co-eds that were all complaining of substance abuse related issues and co-occurring disorders. So I was there for maybe 3 or 4 years, was their director of outreach, met many people in the substance abuse industry as part of that role, and left to venture into it and have been in it ever since in the Southeast Florida area.
How do you think you developed a passion for it? Because I mean, you got to have a passion for it because it's physically, emotionally, it's exhausting work. I mean, it's not a Monday through Friday 9 to 5 kind of job. It's these are people who are in crisis, not just the person who is sort of, I don't know, the addict or the person dealing with the issue, but probably more so the family, because the person in the middle, that's the status quo. It's the family around that's really having a tough time dealing with these issues.
Yes. I think I love each client I work with and their families. I also love the challenges that the epidemic gives us as providers. So I don't want to equate it to the HIV/AIDS movement in the 1980s, but at that time we knew so little, there wasn't anything to be done, and I was quite young then. But in looking at it historically, it had the same feel of, wow, this is an epidemic killing a ton of people, and we don't know what to do with it or about it or how to treat it. And so I felt like I was watching that here in Southeast Florida, killing our youth at high numbers, and it being an epidemic that we didn't have a skill set or a toolbox or even a resource list. It was literally the Wild West. And so I became very passionate about trying to clearly streamline how the work was done, not only ethically and morally and legally, but just good practice, because there was no good practice handbook at the time.
I think it's somewhat ironic that, we're sort of in the epicenter, right? Because we had this massive pill problem that's, I think, a lot of this sort of national issue started right here in South Florida, and yet, probably due in large part to Dave Ehrenberg and the task force, we're also coming up with a solution, because now we're in the middle of a national epidemic and we're also focusing on fixing the thing, which is, I think, I love it. I think it's great.
I'm so glad you said that. I'm incredibly proud of Southeast Florida, what we've accomplished and how we've morphed over the last 5 years. And yes, kudos to Dave Ehrenberg and the whole task force team and everyone that's contributed to it. We have really created a playbook that makes treatment now in Southeast Florida not only much more functional, legal, ethical, moral, but really good, solid treatment with, I believe, we will later see higher relapse prevention rates than other states.
Yeah, it's ironic. A couple of months ago, I was up at the task force. Dave has been very gracious, and Al and I were in county court together as young prosecutors. So whenever they sort of talk about the issue of involuntary commitment, Dave will say, "Hey, can you come up? We have this new piece of legislation." And I said to the task force before we talked about the legislation, I said, you don't understand what you've done here. I said, because I'm on the ground zero along with some of the clinicians. I said, what you've done is you've actually made Florida a more attractive place to come for treatment, not less. Because what you've done is you've gotten rid of the bad actors. You've either arrested them or they've gone out of business. And now we have, for parents who are bringing their children in, because most of my clients the parents are out of state. It's the children that are here. People are still bringing their children here. And if anything, it's almost reassuring to the family, because they know, listen, if the treatment center is doing something wrong, either the owners are getting arrested or they're just going to go out of business. And I actually, say to the family, we still have the best selection of treatment providers right here in South Florida. Unless you want to send your kid to Texas or California.
Well, and California would be the scarier
right
of those three in my mind. Completely agree. When I have families that would ask me 10 years ago, or say, I'm concerned about sending my child to Florida, I would have to say, let me help you find what's going to be the reputable sources, with no guarantee should that particular client want to AMA and go use and find some shady character up the street and whatever. I couldn't control that, and I knew those shady characters existed, but to be able to say to a parent now, 10 years later, you're good. We know who we are in the field in Florida, and we know who's good and solid, and we're the ones left standing. I can help, and that client will be educated enough to find the right moves and not risk or fear what they might in California right now or in Texas right now.
Yeah. So, I know there's a couple things that you told me you want to talk about, but I'm going to have a couple things I want to run by you.
Yeah.
Because I'm willing to bet you're seeing somewhat similar issues to me. The first issue is sometimes we get a lot of calls from, typically it's the mum that calls, and I always joke, I say if I had a nickel for every mother I'd either made cry or made me cry, I'd be very wealthy. We speak to a lot of crying mums. But sometimes you have the parents on different pages, right? One parent is willing to do whatever it takes, and the other parent says, "Look, I'm done. I'm not doing it." So how do you deal with sometimes where you can't get everybody, sort of both parents or whoever the decision maker is on the same page as the person who wants to take action? How do you deal with that? Because that's an issue for us, right? And if you can't get everybody on the same page, unless somebody's willing to, like mom's willing to do it without dad, it's not happening.
It's true. It ends up being a challenge for all of us. I may have not had as many circumstances of that just because they're coming to me at a different point than they might be coming to you.
Right.
That said, and part of it'll link into one of my bullet points that I had, but the education is so critical. So when I do education programming in any facility I work at, with both the clients and the parents, it's so critical because I'm giving them a wealth of information. No moral judgment, no ethical judgment. I'm giving them statistics, medical facts, reasons for thinking a certain way about something, information about so many different things that they would never know. And they leave almost always saying, I'm thinking differently about this now. And sometimes that's enough without me needing to push or motivate to have them come to their own different conclusion. And I find that can help get two people on the same page quicker.
Yeah, and I think that's really important because sometimes the parents, one parent will say, well, I don't understand. Why don't they just stop? Why would anybody rationally or objectively do this to themselves? And I'm like, well, you have to understand, I think that substance use disorder or mental health disorder is very much like cancer, right? I mean, it's not, there are various components that cause it, but if you could choose not to have cancer, we'd all make that decision. Obviously, there's something else going on here that means the person can't stop, or they would. So maybe give us a little insight just from a clinician's perspective about what might be going on up there with somebody who can't stop using.
Well, and it's interesting just to speak a minute to those parents. So it's almost like the old adage of someone saying, not understanding depression. I don't understand. Why can't they just get up and go about their day? Right. And so explaining depression is very much like explaining addiction in the same concept. And when you give either the client and or the parent or both the information of, wait a minute, depression's one thing, bipolar 1 is one thing, bipolar 2 is another, schizoaffective is another. There's so many nuances, but they're critical. And the right diagnosis leads to the right treatment. When we put addiction into that same template, it seems to resonate differently. And they understand there are symptoms that are true to form of the disease and the sickness. And those symptoms may not look like what you expect. And you cannot snap your fingers or tell that person to snap out of it and have that happen.
Right. I think it's definitely an issue. And the other thing that we deal with sometimes here is, I always joke, people don't like calling it. One of the other words of wisdom my father imparted on me was he used to say, I hate all the lawyers except for you, right? So maybe I became a little bit paranoid. And being a lawyer it's a small part of what we do, right? Getting to work with great clinicians like you and Gary Kett, all these other great people we've met, is very much a part of what we do, other than the legal work. But a lot of the time, so when parents call us, we're really sort of almost feel like we're the port of last call. Nobody wants to call us, right? We're built like a dentist. I know I don't go to the dentist until I got a toothache if I can avoid it, right? So sometimes they'll say to us, look, my child's been, had 2 or 3 overdoses. They've been to multiple treatment centers. I mean, sometimes they're telling me they've been to 10 or 12 treatment centers. They're like, so tell me, what's going to be different now? What's going to be different now if I do a Marchman Act or I do a guardianship? And so, I maybe speak to that because I'm sure you get people's loved ones coming in who have been to treatment before and it hasn't been successful, or it hasn't taken, or they haven't stayed in recovery.
So I do want to speak to that. I also want to give a shout out to the lawyers out there. That the reality that the legal community and the mental health community so have to be in alignment on this one for treatment of this epidemic has been seen over and over, and we've done such a great job. You and I know we reach out to legal when we need legal, we reach out to mental health when we need mental health. And the fact that we know our wheelhouses and we work synchronistically and need to for these clients is so critical. So that we're not having like joint luncheons of lawyers and mental health, and you and I have spoken about we need to do this, is a really big part of this. And even when we look at Ehrenberg and the task force and the legal and the political implications behind change in Florida and change in substance abuse treatment, I believe one is inextricably tied up with the other.
And not only that, I mean, they say that the legal profession, if you're a lawyer, probably they say statistically you're twice as likely to be dealing with a substance use disorder as maybe if you are. I mean, that's not really a surprise, but I think that's also true of the legal profession, doctors and other people who are working in a stressful environment, where it's very much a performance-based profession.
Well, and I've been an advocate of organizations like Lawyers Helping Lawyers. So I've spoken in Virginia to those lawyers, and that's a group of professionals that say, look, addiction doesn't discriminate. It hits lawyers, it hits doctors, and we need people that understand our profession, our concerns about getting treatment in the profession, and being able to resume practicing as a lawyer or a doctor after we're successfully treated. So to speak to those individuals also has been it's been a gift for me to be able to give back to a helping community that's worked hand in hand on this whole epidemic from the beginning. Okay, that was my sidebar about the synchronistic relationship between lawyers.
I love it. So let's talk about what you're doing. So right now you're a comprehensive wellness, right?
Yep. I'm their director of outpatient services.
Okay.
So a bit of a different role. I've been clinical director of multiple facilities and really loved watching in that role, whether it's, and it sounds so small, but it's huge, a joint commission accreditation process or a DCF review, because I really look at every single lesson along the way as an excellent learning lesson. There's always something that can be corrected. There's always something that can be done better. And in 15 years in this field, I found, 100 things that I now know because I've gone through those processes, what can be done better, smoother, makes more sense. And so I've loved working in that administrative capacity. I've also loved working with clients and their families one-on-one. So this one was a bit of a step back of supervisory responsibility for me, which I personally was a break, which is great. Self-care for mental health clinicians and substance abuse is critical. And it's funny to think that working one-on-one is a break, but it is. From the administrative stuff, it is. And so I get the joy and privilege right now of directing clients that are already at least 60 days sober. They're making their way back into functional independent adulthood. They're getting jobs back. They're looking at legal issues, tax issues, child support, whatever is still remaining, relationships with family, loved ones, finding employment, sometimes with a criminal record. And that's where we reach out to attorneys and say, help us help them. And it's such a beautiful spot for me to be in, to get to offer that service, because too often facilities discharge a client and that's that. And they have no ongoing supports or minimal to really help them effectuate change from 2 months sobriety to a year sobriety, which is the biggest relapse time. It's when they need it most. So my job is now to do that. So it's perfect.
So let's talk about, I know the two things that you want to focus on because they're really important. So number one was education. So let's talk about that.
Yeah. So kudos to Comprehensive. They've really valued and encouraged this education program. And I would love to see it be a hallmark. I have no titling needs to it. It's just a great program for clients. I think that should be incorporated at every facility. And our clients who have been to 10, 12 facilities will say they've never learned this. So my job is to empower the client. The client is with us for maybe 90 days most. And then they're going somewhere. And I want them to have in their heads the education they need to get the treatment they need, regardless of where they are. So I literally go through an education, a 4-part series, where we teach diagnostics. Because too often clients are misdiagnosed. They've walked into the hospital from a meth trip and they're diagnosed as manic and bipolar, and that may or may not be the case when they're sober. Or they've had a substance-induced psychotic episode and they're diagnosed with schizophrenia, and that's not accurate either. So the importance of accurate diagnoses for accurate treatment is known. And so to tell the client who walks in saying, oh, here are my diagnoses, and it's like a laundry list, that they don't understand the diagnoses, they may not agree with the diagnoses, and they actually may not be accurate or apply. So we literally teach our clients the art of diagnostics so that they can help not diagnose themselves or undiagnose themselves, but work with their therapist and say, I'm questioning this. Trauma is the biggest. Everyone in our industry usually comes in with some trauma. If we checked off the box of trauma and automatically diagnosed PTSD, we'd be doing a huge disservice to clients that might have huge traumas and not have PTSD, or have minor traumas and have PTSD. So when we do that, clients will often say they feel so relieved. We literally share the DSM with them. We literally share how this is done and the art of this, so that they can figure out what's going on with them, and so that they can get treatment for that and hopefully prevent relapse.
Yeah, it's interesting. When I got divorced about 17 years ago, I had a friend of mine who was a therapist, and one of the things that she helped to educate me on was, she's like, I'm going to explain to you emotionally, because I said, this is what I'm feeling. Let me explain to you how this all sort of works, so you know what's coming, right? If you're feeling this, you should expect that, right? Mm-hmm. And she sort of explained to me like the cycle of things and why I was feeling certain ways. And when I started to understand it, like when it, so she's, there's going to be, you're going to start to feel this. And when it happened, I'm like, okay, yeah, I get it. I'm going to go through this period of time, and then things that, And it was so once I sort of cognitively understood like why I was feeling the way I was and what I should expect to be feeling, it changed everything. I'm like, okay, yeah, this is part of the recovery process, right, for me. Yeah. Getting, and it really made a huge difference. It really did. It helped me to recover much quicker because I knew it was coming, or I understood why I was feeling a certain way.
I'm glad you said that. And typically, yes, as human beings, we like to know if someone can show us a roadmap that we understand and what to expect and what to maybe predict or how to treat it if it comes up. That's half the battle. That, and also in this education format, the clients are spoken to with much respect. I speak in the same language, more or less, as I'm doing now. And I think clients who are particularly institutionalized, have been in 5, 6, 7 programs, are so used to being, I don't want to say told what to do. That sounds bad. But yes, in essence, take this medicine, go to this group, without the explanation or without the big words in respect of, you can understand this. Let me help you understand this because you need to know it. And I'm going to speak with you as I'm going to speak with you and everyone else. And the clients will say they love that. Like it's a breath of fresh air that they're reminded that they're competent, capable, bright human beings that are perfectly able to hear this message and want to and need to.
I love it. So let's talk about follow through. It's interesting. One of the conversations I had early on with Dave and some other people, I said, you got to make treatment available to everybody, right? And I think that's important. But then I sat down and had a conversation with John Hewlett, and I told him that, and he said, well, yeah, that's true, but he said the piece you're missing is what happens after they get out of treatment, whether we provide them with treatment or they can afford it, they pay for it, or there's insurance, whatever it is. He says the piece that really makes it all sort of work is what happens after they get out of treatment, because at some point they're going to get out of treatment. And if they don't have access to employment or a house or medical care or whatever it is, or some type of support structure like a sponsor or 12-step, whatever it is, he says they're going to relapse, almost certainly. And I never really thought about it because I was like, we'll get them in treatment and then, the treatment center will do what they need to do and that'll be the end of it, right? But it's not true. Because, even my friends in the treatment industry who are maybe 5, 10, 15 years, into recovery, I've noticed they all have a lot of them have a sponsor. They go to meetings weekly, sometimes twice weekly. And so they work on their recovery all the time. They never stop working on it. And I never really thought about it, but I think one of the things we talked about was like the whole idea of follow through. My God, it's so critical.
It is. That, again, when they're discharged, let's say at 3 months sober, that time between 3 months and 12 months is one of the most challenging because they're without the support of the treatment facility. They're not being checked regularly for UAs. They're making money. There's not accountability in the same way. Halfway houses, 3/4 houses, some of which are super well run, and we're so grateful for those, still aren't there to babysit. It's not that way. So having empowered and educated the client before they've left your facility about what should be in a discharge plan, and then being there to check along the way is one of the most helpful things. So I've had clients, let's say, 4 months sober, no longer in our program, still see me weekly. Maybe they miss a week, and I'll text, how are you doing? Checking in on you. And they'll say, I'm so glad you did. I do need to see you. I recognize I'm working too much. I need to make time. It's important. And that's on them because they've already learned that while in our facility. And they do. They make the time, they come in. And whether it's a meeting or therapy or both, whichever they're turning to, the fact that they recognize part of their care involves this ongoing work is important. And that it's now self-motivated is incredibly helpful. I'm not chasing them. I'm maybe sending a text. And then they're motivated to do it. Okay,
so somebody, say, comes to your treatments in a comprehensive wellness. How does that all broken down? Because even with the March where we get 90 days, we get a quarter for 90 days. Normally it looks like 30 days of residential, and then there's some type of lower level of care. Mm-hmm. And a lot of the time that's insurance driven, right? Insurance company says, well, we'll pay for up to 30 days, and after that, we're only going to pay for either a PHP or an ILP. So how does that all sort of connect with what's really clinically needed for the client?
So just to be clear, comprehensive doesn't have detox or residential. So we're PHP and IOP and OP. So those 3 levels of care. And I've strongly encouraged our owner and the management to continue to just improve on that. And we have, and it's been beautiful. Like we do those 3 levels of care beautifully.
So are you getting somebody that may have gone through, say, detox, resi, and then they're coming to you?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Or detox to us. And so it makes it where, so this education component can continue along with support at any of those levels. So even if their insurance moved them quickly through, they're still going to get all of it because I'm doing education for PHP, I'm doing education for IOP, and I'm doing it for OP as part of a series in a seminar that they get regardless.
So maybe explain the difference between the three.
Sure, yeah.
Because I've sort of learned it as I've gone along, but...
Yeah, so continuum of care, when someone describes it, at the most intense, I guess, for lack of a better word, is detox. When someone's going through withdrawal, it's usually medical. There's a doctor there. They should be watched 24/7, given comfort meds, etc. Not a lot of great therapy can go on during that moment because the client's usually in considerable physical distress. And hopefully we give the palliative care and they're helped enough that they're able to get through their detox experience without great discomfort.
How long does that typically last, the detox?
So I don't work in a detox facility, but I want to say 3 days to 7 days, depending. If they're on something like a very high dose of a benzo, it may take longer. There might be a slower titration. And so then not everyone goes to residential. Residential would be the next high level of care from detox. Residential can be 30 days. It's still 24/7 watch. There's still a medical component. It does involve more therapeutic groups. Clients are encouraged to have goals set, diagnostics should be set, treatments should be set, etc., but still watched with much more intensity from a medical model and a therapy model than PHP. And then next up would be, or step up would be, or down would be PHP, which is partial hospitalization program. Literally, in the state of Florida, it's 5 hours a day of clinical work. That is a PHP day. So clients will say, well, can I live at home? Many programs, yes, you can. Some programs find it too much of a risk, both for the clients living there and for the client seeking treatment. There's no specific rule that one has to or cannot live at home while participating in PHP. So at that level of care, 5 hours a day of therapy is good therapy, but there's so much more. So most programs have programming that continues on. So if they're living at our facility, there's meetings, there's opt-in step work. We never force that. We just educate, same way we would educate about Smart Recovery or Celebrate Recovery or other options. We help with basic life skills. So at that point, we're trying to help clients become functional, independent adults, and most of them have not. Most of them have used through their adolescence, through their early college.
Very dysfunctional.
So whether it's cleaning, grocery shopping, budgeting, circling back to case management stuff, legal issues, parenting issues, you name it, we're helping with all of that while they're with us in PHP. And then IOP, Intensive Outpatient Program, is the next, which is literally 3 hours a day of clinical groups. Our IOP groups end up being very different in nature and form. So when you look at any facility's schedule for the week of groups, typical PHP groups are relapse prevention, cognitive behavioral therapy, grief processing, things like that. And the IOP groups tend to be much more with functional living things. So whether they have their phones back, whether they're dealing with calls from people they don't want, or family members that are threatening or harassing, or someone's going through a divorce. The IOP groups deal much more with life after that higher level of treatment. And then OP, or outpatient, is literally, they can live at our facility. They can choose a halfway, 3/4 apartment, whatever. And they're coming in as you would, or I would, for medicine, for mental health, EMDR, whichever works for their discharge plan and whatever makes sense for their diagnoses. So does that help a little on the continuum?
I got it.
Okay.
I love it.
So the interesting thing, Comprehensive has something that we call hybrid, which doesn't really exist anywhere. And we did it specifically because we know insurance might take someone quickly through PHP, IOP, OP, and we still want them to have certain access to groups and lessons, the education plan, things that are going to help them, that are going to up their chances of long-term sobriety. So we created hybrid, a non-billable and unknown entity, so that we could offer that.
I love it. I think it's great. So let's talk a little bit about the future. Where do we see things going in terms of the treatment and things here? Because we're trying to, we're really sort of setting the benchmark here in Florida, right? And I know that we're going to have this, hopefully, statewide drug task force here, but I think that's going to happen in other states. It's going to have to happen because, I get calls from West Virginia and Ohio. They're telling me that things are out of control there, and they don't have the treatment centers. So, where do we go from here?
This is a bit of politics. I am so hopeful.
We love to talk politics. We try not to be political, but yeah.
There's my public shout
That's
out
part
to
of our
Governor
friendship, I think,
DeSantis.
Dawn.
I am so hopeful that Florida really does spearhead this movement. So whether it becomes set programming that's seen as the prototype, whether it becomes transferable to other states or mandated to other states or voted on by other states, I think Florida should really be the state that leads the way in setting up, how do we do this right? How do we do this better? So, of course, legal, moral, ethical, but even relapse prevention and just smart, so that as the epidemic morphs, we get a better educated, stronger, hardier group of people in recovery that are able to better manage their resources, and we're better able to offer resources so that the death rates go way down, if not become non-existent, so that the relapse rates go way down, if not non-existent, and so that we've created a society of functional adults in recovery that are able to pull that off. We haven't given them a false bill of goods or a confluence of things we couldn't possibly expect them to succeed at. And I really want Florida to be the state that's able to do that. And I think we're the perfect place to do it.
Yeah, I mean, we have a lot of people that really care. They're trying to make a difference, not just clinical, but I will tell you, our judges here, especially South Florida, Palm Beach, Broward, fabulous, really switched on. We have a state attorney here that's really, obviously Dave's done a bang up job, but I hear they're setting up a drug task force there in Broward. And they should, because clearly we've shown that, just by cleaning up the industry, you get rid of all the bad actors, and that obviously benefits people who are coming to Florida. And we want people to come to Florida.
It's interesting. You had said somewhat a while ago that what makes the difference when someone's been through 10 treatment facilities and you're the 11th or the 12th. And honestly, sometimes it's just they're not ready. The clients will tell you, I went because I was forced to. My parents made me. It was legally mandated. So sometimes they're not ready, but it's interesting how much when you have good, solid programming with good, solid aftercare, that rate of success goes up. And so not to say there's ever going to be a scenario where we could predict that one person will go through 1 versus 10 treatments, but I would love to know and see Florida's rates of making it where this is the last time they've needed that level of care of treatment. Ongoing outpatient, fine. Ongoing IOP, fine. That's a helpful resource. But it still keeps them functional, sober adults while getting extra resources that they need. And I think that's really a goal that we're going for.
I love it. I'm going to run something that just came to mind. I'm going to ask you about one other thing. I saw something on, I think it was either 60 Minutes, one of those type of programs, and I think it's going on in Norway, where they have this, I think it's Norway. One of the Scandinavian countries has this sort of legalized heroin program. So they were saying, they had a terrible problem with, an epidemic of heroin users. And of course, the street level heroin it's not a pure form of heroin. So they set up this sort of state-run heroin thing where people who are addicted to heroin could come in, they get clean needles, they get pure heroin, but they also get support. And what they found is that a significant people who were coming in to use this to take the legalized heroin were actually accepting of the support services. A lot of them were getting off. And just as we were sitting here, I just thought about it. It sort of came to mind because you were talking about how important that support system is. I don't see it ever happening here in Florida, but I mean, just from a clinical perspective, I mean,
there's a lot.
You could just see us opening up. We had a hard time legalizing marijuana, and that's a whole other different kettle of fish. But I can never see here in Boca opening up come to the local heroin clinic. But
even if we look at MAT treatment programs, so I mean that's huge. And yes, Florida did legalize medical marijuana, and more to come. But when we look at MAT treatment programs, so many clients don't understand, or sometimes 12-step philosophy, or who they're getting wisdom from 12-step philosophy will discourage it without medical model or knowledge behind it. So when we look at MAT treatments, so there's 2 different ways. There's Suboxone, methadone, maintenance type, and then there's anti-craving, naltrexone, Vivitrol, Camprol, etc. They do 2 different things in 2 different ways. And so when you get a client that doesn't even know that exists and says, I've relapsed at 8 months every time because my cravings are unbearable, and we say, wait, what about looking at the MAT stuff? And they think MAT is methadone, and then we tell them about naltrexone and Vivitrol. The difference is night and day. And to have a client say, well, will AA accept me with this? And I say, well, I can't control what AA accepts or doesn't. I can tell you medically what Vivitrol does and why it's successful and how it helps. And then you can decide. And just to watch even that be such a game changer for so many clients is amazing.
It's so true. It's interesting. When I was a young prosecutor, so I was a student intern in 1993. I got a chance to intern. And I always joke, thank goodness I worked for Barry Krish's office. Thank goodness they hired me. I'd probably be selling used cars because it was I knew within literally my first trial, within a couple of weeks, I'm like, I got to do this. And I really sort of came in there with this whole mindset of, that everybody was in the system, they had to be bad. And, even the legislative mandate here in Florida is to punish first and rehabilitate second. But then, when after they hired me, I started to realize, I started to see the same people coming back. I was like, something's going on here because these are the same people I was seeing over and over again. And I'm like, a lot of the people that we have in our system are there because they have substance use and mental health disorders, and we're not really, it sounds like we're not really fixing them, or we're not helping them to get the support they need. I'm not saying there aren't some people who commit horrible crimes and shouldn't go to prison. But, we are, when they talk about the revolving door in the emergency room, I mean, we have a revolving door at the courthouse too. Yeah. And I see it, and I'm like, we got to do a better job of helping those people because otherwise they're going to keep coming back. And it's costing us a fortune to re-prosecute these people and incarcerate them. And obviously, if we can keep somebody in recovery, their chances of crime and whatever else goes along with it, I mean, it's got to be significantly reduced.
And so
I know it's a whole lot of stuff there,
and sometimes you make me have brainstorms that may or may not go on a podcast. So I'm not sure about this one, but the concept of a voluntary Marchman Act is a beautiful thing in terms of if that would help someone get legal issues cleaned up while still mandating themselves voluntarily for treatment. It's a novel idea. I don't know. I don't know if the legal world has already thought about it, dismissed it.
So you're saying if somebody was to be Marchman Acted, and sometimes when we get them into court, then... So here's the thing. Most of the time, if they've been through that period of assessment where they've also been detoxed, I would say 7, maybe 8 times out of 10, they will agree to go to treatment. So a lot of the time, it's not a contested hearing, and the judge will just basically enter a stipulated or an agreed order where there's no finding of fact, and they will agree to go to treatment. Mm-hmm. And that's a beautiful thing. But maybe what you're suggesting is if they will agree to go to treatment under a court order, maybe we can expunge some of the... I love it. Maybe some of their criminal past can be removed as a kid. I think that would be huge. I love it.
I'm so glad, and I
love it. I never thought about that, but I'm like, you know what? If we can say, listen, if you go to treatment for 90 days and you do what you need to do, that theft conviction you have, we're gonna expunge it from your record.
For longer than 30 days, just knowing how the mental health process and change takes hold.
I love it.
I don't know that the clients would love that, but I think that's in their best interest, and they would probably agree with me. That said, it's that period of 3 months to a year sobriety when they're done with treatment, so they need housing. Like, this is where the whole patient brokering and if I relapsed, you'll house me came up. So we didn't have a group of homeless clients. That 3 months to 12 months where someone's looking for work and legitimately sometimes having trouble finding it.
And can't get a job because they have a conviction for theft that happened 10 years ago.
And feels like, great, now I'm sober, but the world is kind of against me. Like, I can't get a job. I can't do these things. And I want to. Like, I want to be a productive citizen. I want to work. So really looking at that 3-month, 12-month period from legal and mental health standpoint, so back to the great synergy, I think is critical.
Oh, I like that. I really do. See? You got some of that.
I've motivated you.
I have. You got some of that. See, I knew you got some of that legal mind kicking in.
Thanks, Dad.
Really? Thanks, Dad. So I'm glad you came on. I appreciate you. I just enjoy your company, and with such a connection. And so I want to tell people how will they get a hold of you? How do they find out about Comprehensive? Get in touch with you and all that fun stuff.
So Comprehensive Wellness Centers is in Lantana, Florida. It's I actually don't know our main number, which is odd, but I notably, and you know it too.
So I bet we can find it. Should we find it?
We can, but I also literally give my cell phone out, and you know this about me.
Okay.
I do.
Okay.
And I do because I'm the first line of defense for so many clients where calling... I never want outreach to have a bad rap because outreach has such a good job in terms of educating and advertising for clients that need help. But outreach can be scary, and outreach can be intimidating, and outreach can be aggressive from a sales standpoint. So when clients know they can call my number and there's no salesy pitch going on, there's literally a lifeline of education if they want it, it can make all the difference. And to date, thankfully, I've done right, apparently, by everyone in the community because my cell phone has only been used for good and not for evil. And it's saved tons of clients that reach out and say, help, like I can't talk to a salesperson, but I know I need treatment. And whether they come to my facility or a different facility or whatever makes sense for them, that they reached out and that I was able to help them is what I do for a living every single day.
I love it. So do you want to give it?
I will give it. It's fine.
Okay.
561-314-5214.
I mean, I should know that by heart, right? And for the folks that are watching this, if you haven't already posted a question, I would encourage you to do so, either for myself or Dr. Dawn. You can follow us on the web, drugandalcoholattorneys.com. You can email me, mark@drugandalcoholattorneys.com, or you can call us, 561-419-6095. We're on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, YouTube. I don't know if I've forgotten anything else, but you shouldn't have a problem finding us, if only just so they can make contact with Dr. Dawn. And thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you guys next week.
Thanks so much.
You were great.